what I've got is Designing for Humanity, how a humanitarian design approach can tackle social, cultural and environmental problems. We've got three cracking panelists today talking about designing for humanity. We've got Max Fraser, we've got Paul Cournet, and we've got Carl Gerges. I'm going to ask each of you to, first of all, introduce yourselves. Tell us 30 seconds who you are, where you're from, and most importantly, correct me on the dreadful pronunciation of your names. Max, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. So yes, Max Fraser, I'm a design author, journalist, curator and consultant, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what that entails is essentially circling around the design industry, reporting on the activities of individual designers, companies, manufacturers and so on across the world. And I've written a number of books. I'm currently writing a book here in France, where I'm based right now, about a British designer called Benjamin Hubert, who's an industrial designer in London.
You set the bar very, very high for introduction.
Okay, good.
Paul Cournet, over to you. Thank you, sir.
My name is Paul Cournet. I'm an architect. I'm currently based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. Actually, it's been 10 years I've been here. And I'm working for OMA, the architectural practice. So we're working internationally, and I'm basically working on architectural projects, mostly in Europe. And also within OMA, we have this entity called AMO, so research-based entity, where we're doing everything but architecture. So it ranges from scenography, strategies, curatorial programs, etc., etc. And I have a feet basically in between the two entities.
Finally, we have with us Carl. Carl, I'm going to ask you to help me out here, mate. You've got two G's in your name, and I don't know which one is hard and which one is soft.
They're the same, like they're Gerges, you know.
Humility and love. Please introduce yourself.
So I'm Carl Gerges. I'm Lebanese. I'm a musician and an architect, and I have a band called Mashroua Leila, and I launched a studio called Carl Gerges Architect, and we have like projects between Beirut and Paris for now. And I juggle a lot between the two fields, you know, between music and architecture, and I also sometimes work on scenographies, and yeah, that's it.
Let's kick off by setting the scene when it comes to designing for humanity. Rather than designing for our own egotistical reasons or designing for money, which I think all of us have done, and that's fine, you got to pay the bills. But give us your thesis on why we do need to design for humanity and how we do it in terms of the social, the cultural, the environmental, and so on. And I'm going in reverse order. So, Carl, first of all, why is designing for humanity important? Why do we even need to care about this idea?
I think because we're not the only one on the planet, and we have to think, you know, forward. We have to think about the future, and you know, especially for us in Beirut. I don't know if you're aware, but we had like one of the worst year that we ever lived. We had an explosion like 2 months ago that really destroyed more than half of the city, and we've been dealing with an economic crisis and COVID, etc. And at this point, really, COVID is the least of our worries. So us, like as designers and architects, we had to quickly adapt, you know, to what happened, because we had really like from a day to another an entire city to rebuild and to fix, without any resources and without money actually. So, and we've always relied on importing products and construction materials, and we blindly followed, you know, the international techniques of construction. So we had to adapt really quickly. And I think this is an aspect that, you know, designing for, not really for the environment, but like in a sustainable way, doesn't really always mean to build green. I think it also means using the available resources and using the local know-how and local artisans. And we've been, you know, exploring those new techniques because we don't really have a choice. And I think it's been positive because we've, you know, we started reconnecting with artisans and rediscovering local materials.
There's so much more that we could talk about the situation in Beirut, and we will. Yeah. And we'll get back to that. But Paul, if I can turn to you first of all, there's quite a few kind of emigres at the moment. I don't think anyone in this panel is sitting in the country of their birth. Paul, you're French by birth, but you're in the Netherlands at the moment. give me your 2-minute thesis on why we have to design for humanity. What are some of the problems that you are trying to solve through design?
Yeah, it's, I mean, indeed, we're living in a very interesting time, isn't it? I mean, between the news of different political situation at the moment, the current corona situation, the climate crisis that we are all basically touching in different ways. There's a lot of discussion to be done about those things. And as an architect working in the Netherlands and in general, I would say quite internationally, the issues of climate change and finding reasons of designing are basically our day-to-day questions. You know, this is not like a single day where you can wake up and then think of working without those questions hovering over your daily workplace. So it's a very challenging time. We definitely have to, I think, rethink the way we work, the way we think processes. And then being an architect, I'm trying to hopefully have a positive impact on the projects I'm working on at the moment. So that's my take.
Good stuff. We'll explore those in more detail in some time. So from our Frenchman in Rotterdam, we have our Englishman where, Max? Exactly. If we had a Google Maps track on you, where would you be?
I'm in the east of France, in a region called the Jura, which is sort of between Dijon and Geneva. And if I could paint the scene, which the imagery behind me doesn't, I am actually surrounded by fields and trees and cows.
Yeah, I mean, we don't rely on Teams and Zoom, can't we?
Yeah. The reason I'm here
I'm joking apart, Max. This idea of designing for humanity, I know it's something that you do take very, very, very seriously. There are problems to be solved. Design can help to solve them. What's your 2-minute thesis?
Well, it's an interesting one because I would suggest that design has always had humanity at its core, and if anything, we've sort of slightly lost our focus on that in recent years, and that's perhaps come about by virtue of the fact that we've lived quite good times. Right, in the 20th century, certainly the latter half of the 20th century, with the developments that we had and the wealth that was accumulated, we have sort of increasingly been, I feel like the design industry's increasingly been serving humans, yes, but perhaps too many of the rich variety, and lost sight of a lot of its ethical and sustainable responsibilities. And that, of course, has had a knock-on effect on the planet because we've had this attitude that we can continue to extract from the planet, from its resources, and that there will be no consequences for that. So we have a responsibility as an industry to to pull our socks up quite firmly to address that. And I know it's talked about endlessly, but I'm not personally seeing enough in the right direction there. And then, of course, as I mentioned, with the riches of the latter 20th century, inequality, I think, has grown to such a disproportionate extent now that design needs to stop, quoting a friend of mine, design needs to stop being the industry that picks up the crumbs that the rich sweep off their table, and the crumbs being the jobs. And actually just need to shift our focus. You know, I, like you, Richard, I'm not on the front line. I don't design anything. So I am an observer of this industry. So I can see the good and the bad and the ugly. That's what I try and find every day. And I think what we need to embrace from this situation right now with COVID, with the political situations, with instances like the tragedy in Beirut, is that actually design has the ability to help in so many ways. So in emergencies like in Beirut, in communications through our electoral campaigns, through to community-driven projects that house people in an affordable way, through to our food systems and our distribution systems and so on and so on. Our procurement of materials. I think we've lost touch of where our materials come from in the planet, and we just, as an industry, take the final material and do something with it. But actually, what about all the bits that come before? We need to understand that better to understand the footprint that we're leaving on the planet as well.
Okay, well, I'm going to challenge you on pretty much all of those, Max, as a shareholder in a design company. Because honestly, as a shareholder of a design company in Dubai, we are, and I'm not proud of this, but we're trying to make as much money as we can out of billionaires on the Forbes list. We're trying to push as many products as we can from Vitra and Herman Miller and Steelcase and Morosso and so on. And I'm not proud of that, but I think, honestly, that is what we're doing. But first of all, Carl, I'm going to turn to you. A couple of people have mentioned the situation that's happened in Beirut over the past couple of months. We know the explosion at Beirut port happened a couple of months ago, and it was just beyond horrific. Can you explain to us, first of all, set the scene, where were you when that happened? And then maybe we can quickly take the conversation into how design can not just be about making a rich man's folly and pushing products, but actually solving some of the very real problems that your country is facing.
I was actually in my house / office, and I was in the kitchen when, you know, it happened, the explosion happened in
Paris.
There was, in Beirut. I just arrived in Paris like a couple of weeks ago for a project that I'm working on, but I was in Beirut and I was in the kitchen, I was cooking, and I heard like a first explosion. So I got closer to the window, and I live like less than a kilometer from the blast. So I got closer to the window to see what's happening, and it exploded, and I was projected back into the kitchen, and my like entire apartment was destroyed. Like my computer flew, everything flew inside the house. The wine bottles exploded. It was really like surreal. And on the spot, you don't really know what was happening. So I hid in the powder room and waited a bit, and then I started hearing sirens and people screaming on the street. So I rushed to the balcony, and I saw that the city was completely destroyed. And I was lucky in a way because I live in an old building from the 30s. It's an Art Deco building, so I don't have those huge glazed facades. I just have wooden windows. So I didn't get heavily injured like other people. So yeah.
Okay, so if we, how do I frame this? You're in Paris, you're working on a project, you're a successful designer, you have a commercially successful business that I would imagine, not dissimilar to Raw, the interior design firm I work for, is essentially makes its money for designing things that are beautiful and aspirational. And I'm sure you charge good money for that. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being presumptuous, but that's often the case with successful designers, that's the business model. How do you reconcile that, Carl, with the just incredible trauma that your home city, your home country has been through, and as a designer using your skills to kind of solve some of those problems? And please forgive me if I'm making assumptions that are wrong.
No, don't worry. No, like I think it was so violent that we completely forgot about our past life and about what we were used to do. At this moment, really, like everybody was we're all on the same level, I think. And as designers and architects, we all, rushed to help our friends who lost their apartments or had, major damages to their structures. And we weren't really thinking of, designing beautiful things anymore. It was just, we were in survival mode in a way. So, and there is another important aspect, I think, is like it's all the architectural heritage in Beirut. So the Gerges and Mariam Khair, those are two streets that were really affected by the explosion. And those are the two most beautiful streets in Beirut. And they all have, we have very old buildings from the 20s, 30s, 50s, and 60s there. So also as architects, it was our duty to go on site and to raise awareness to try and save those buildings. So in a way, we stopped designing fancy, beautiful things. We were just like doctors on site, trying to help people to fix their spaces and to save damaged structures and architectural heritage.
Well, I'm going to pick up on that phrase. I'm going to borrow that, Carl. I'm going to throw it at you, Paul. Carl said we stopped designing fancy, beautiful things. Those were Carl's words. And often the design industry, not always, but often is about designing fancy, beautiful things. If we're designing for humanity, and that's kind of the point of this panel, or how do we go from fancy and beautiful to saving the world?
Yeah.
Or do we? Do we have to? I don't know. Are they mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as designer, let's say in general, let's use a general term, I think there's always a sort of social responsibility to anything you do. And maybe one of the thing we should learn actually from the current events is to understand how we can design things with a proper meaning. So instead of thinking in terms of beauty or commercial values, maybe I think it's a moment that we as a group of people should really try to rethink how we can produce meaning through design. So some of you guys do it through text, through interviews, but I think also through songs, same with artists producing music. I think you stay relevant or practices stay relevant if they manage to define a specific meaning at a specific given time. And it feels also in general, the topic of the debate is very clear in the sense there is a clear emergency today on a global scale, whether we're in Beirut, in the UK, in the Middle East, somewhere in America. And it's up to us to take that responsibility, as simple as that.
Yeah, okay, I get that, Paul. But as designers earning a living, you really only earn money if you design stuff, whether that's a building or a chair or whatever it may be, or a piece of art. I mean, maybe as a musician, maybe that's slightly different. But as designers, typically stuff has to be the end product, and stuff is environmentally has an environmental cost.
Yes.
How do you square that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, maybe the best case I've encountered recently was a project we started called Post Plastic with a question mark. We originally were asked by a fashion brand in Paris to kind of think of the future of that brand. It was a brand very defined by the question of vinyl, plastic, vinyl material in the 60s, 70s. And today they were trying to be relevant as a brand. And we started that research with AMO, called Post Plastic, where we were looking, and this is actually interesting that both Max and Carl mentioned that word earlier, the question of materials. So we were looking at architecture starting from the question of materials, and just simply thinking, how can architecture have a positive environmental impact when we start from the question of materials? And we started to look, and then we started to encounter like literally dozens and dozens of possibilities, from recycling of materials, starting from waste, so recycling of glass, recycling of concrete, or even plastic, to bio-based solutions. So we were finding solutions of people designing with salt, people designing with beeswax. I started to write a list here: cork, fruit-based leather, organic wools, etc., etc. And we made this catalog. And our client that was originally not at all in that kind of like mindset, became extremely interested by those solutions. And I think us as designer, one of our role is to have a educational attitude towards the people we work with, whether they're clients, our collaborators, people we encounter also from the design industry, to make people understand that solutions are possible. And yes, it will require a big change of mindsets, but the possibilities are there. And I think if not us, probably not politicians, probably not our clients, will make that change. So in that sense, I'm kind of, I really believe, I firmly believe that our responsibility is big on those terms.
So Max, Paul's talking a good game there about how design could be the solution. But I know you look at the idea that designers create stuff. I mean, stuff is a word that you use. Is there any sense in which designers can be more part of the solution than the problem? Because I get the sense that actually we are part of the problem. We design buildings that we don't necessarily need. We design chairs and cars and clothes and fast fashion. Max, what do you think?
Oh, totally. Oh God, where to start? I mean, just the word
like
stuff.
A nice guy. I'm not having to go at you, Paul. You seem like a lovely guy. But I'm asking Max to attack you.
Please
I mean,
do.
just the word stuff has a sort of derogatory connotation, doesn't it? I mean, I think part of the problem is that we have been churning out stuff so fluidly and without much thought that we now find ourselves in this problem where we have too much stuff of questionable quality, value, be that financial, physical, or societal. At the same time, I acknowledge that you said we need to make money. We are in a situation where we've created a society that is so fixed on money that we have to, we feel the need that we have to get rich all the time. But that's a whole nother conversation. But we do need to put food on our plates. And I do believe that design has a responsibility to create beauty, to create spaces, products, buildings that provide comfort, safety, security, all which is a core component of a healthy life. And I think really this notion of consumption needs to shift. So we need to have a more responsible mindset when it comes to the production of said stuff. So can we make less? Can the manufacturers who show their products every year in Milan, in Dubai, wherever it is, launch less products, but much better products? And when I say better, that of course is subjective, and maybe we can talk about that. My notion of better is maybe not yours, but I'm a believer that we need to, echoing what Paul said, we need to find material, we need to understand materials, we need to understand as an industry where those materials come from and the footprint and the damage that each individual material produces, and to work towards the solutions that are less damaging. We need to produce to a higher quality, but of course that might exclude those who cannot afford it. But for those who can, we should be buying with longevity in mind, so that we're not constantly replacing. And indeed, when we're kitting out a building, does everything need to be new? Do we not have enough in circulation in the world that we can bring the old and the new together? And also, I don't know if I've got time to add this, but in this, we're part of a machine, all of us. We have to earn money, and we need to put food on our plates. But could we, and maybe this is a question back to everyone on this panel, could we, at least in that proposition, commit or dedicate a certain proportion of our time to causes that go beyond the need for us as an individual or as a studio or practice or whatever to make money? Could we?
Carl, if I can turn to you, because you're juggling these two things. You're in Paris working on what I'm sure is a cool project at the moment that you're getting paid well for, as you should. You're a talented designer, and yet in your home country, there's this monumental disaster is happening.
Actually, it's a very tough question, because we're at a stage, like you said, like only in my street, you have maybe 5 different types of buildings, from Art Deco to traditional classical buildings to like very modern contemporary skyscrapers. It's really very eclectic, the mix. And for now, like everything is completely destroyed. And it's been very difficult, to address this problem, especially with the crisis. So we don't have money, we don't have materials, we don't have salaries. So we don't have to really think about salaries, because it's out of the discussion. It's really about surviving.
If I can just jump in, so you're in Paris doing work, and maybe next week you'll be in Bahrain, or
no, I'm coming back to Beirut in a week, because I'm helping friends. Like I said, like people, we need to try to fix as much as possible before winter arrives. Before heavy rain. So we're really in a state of emergency.
I'm just struggling with this idea that somehow we were talking about design for humanity. I don't know, is there a fundamental existential problem with that? Because the profit motive for you, Carl, not to have decided at the age of 19 to become a software engineer who went to work at Google, or an investment banker who went to work at Goldman Sachs as a smart guy coming out of school, decided to be an architect. You have to think at the end of 7 years of architecture school, there's going to be a relatively lucrative career out there for you, or for Paul as well. And for that, you're not going to make that money redesigning apartments for people on low incomes in Beirut. You're going to earn that money. Are you not working for rich people?
Yeah, you're probably right, but we're not in this mindset right now because so much destruction. We're surrounded with destruction, and we like personally, I don't care about money right now. It's not my priority. I just need to to keep the office running and help as much as possible, with the idea that maybe in a year or two things will start to pick up a bit, and this is why I'm in Paris actually. Like, I'm trying to have some projects on the side outside of Beirut to get some money in, and the rest of the time I'm just being there and I'm trying to help as much as possible.
Max.
Yes.
Can I just add something? Because we're talking about the currency of survival here, which of course comes down to money. My currency is words. And, I charge a certain amount to write a word. So if I'm commissioned to write an 1,000-word article for a newspaper, they'll pay me X amount per word. When I'm commissioned by a corporation, I double, if not triple, my word rate. But I take that tripling of fee as an opportunity to then, and this goes back to my previous point, attribute a certain amount of my time to projects that I know are not going to make me any money, but might have a higher cause, be it a cause for humanity, or we want to call it. So I suspect maybe, Carl, you're in those shoes at the moment, and I commend you to charge your corporate clients a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, and he can, but they'll only pay him if they're going to build the stuff or buildings he designed, which will be stunning and beautiful. Paul, can I bring you in here? Look, I'm a child of Thatcher and Reagan from the 1980s, so I'm unashamedly capitalist. What can you share about this debate? Can we have design for humanity that's actually helping the planet when the fundamental business model of design is to design stuff that is arguably inherently damaging to the planet?
Yeah, I must say I don't have the answer. I wish I had, and I wish we all had it probably, because hopefully we'll do a better good to our planet. But I don't have that answer, and I don't know. I must say I really don't know. I think we should probably be inspired by not the Western world, not the world in which we live in. And there is definitely communities today that are living, that have different trajectories and ambitions and kind of communal ideals. So I think we should simply learn from other ways of living, whether it's a matter of time or geographies. And probably there's much more we can think of. I'm going back to my argument on materials. There used to be a time where we used to build without concrete and glass and steel. So that was possible. So saying that today it's not possible to build with those materials that are clearly unsustainable is a lie. And in the same regard, I think there's even in the Western world, there used to be a time where we used to design for the sake of communities, more for the sake of individual rich clients. So there is definitely a solution. Also, when I think about today, the way we're all living and working from home, if someone would have told me it's impossible that the world stops and we cannot travel anymore and we have to work from home, I would not have believed you. I would have said you're an idealist. But this is actually happening now with some devastating impacts, but also very positive ones, where we relearn to work, we relearn to communicate with each other. So hopefully, I don't know, we have to be hopeful and yeah, hopefully we'll manage to find ways to improve.
So if I can pick up on those things, oh, go on, Max, go.
I just, in an attempt to answer your question, Richard, and it would be arrogant to say I've got the answer. I absolutely don't. But I think we're all coming at design from this perhaps a kind of old school approach of like converting materials into something of value, right? So it's inherently extractive in terms of resources. But when I go around graduate exhibitions and I talk to these like 20-somethings coming out of college, God, it makes me sound old. I think they look at us like we're all crazy walking around trade looking at chairs. I mean, they're like, what are you doing? We have got much bigger fish to fry here. You know, and they're hearing the Greta Thunbergs of the world saying, you know, the house is on fire. And I'm like, yeah, the house is on fire. So actually, maybe we need to shift away from thinking about materiality and converting that to value all the time. And actually, one of the great things I've observed with designers throughout my career is their amazing propensity to solve problems. I mean, it's phenomenal. So whenever I've given a brief to a designer to create something in my head, I've got a vision for it, they'll come at it from a completely different angle most of the time. So I think there's sort of design thinking that can be embedded into all sorts of areas of society and business and governments, so that we actually have that kind of, I don't know what the word is, that kind of right hook thinking that will disrupt the way that we do things in the future in a positive way. And you know, there are also a hell of a lot of entrepreneurs with great ideas for ways to solve the issues of the world, and they all need designers. Think of ocean plastic ocean cleanup projects. You know, enormous infrastructural projects always need designers, and designers, by the way, are always in bed with engineers, and engineers are some of the great problem solvers of the world. So I think we just need to shift away from serving other individual interests, financial interests, and shift towards problem solving in a wider context.
Okay.
And last thing, but quickly, sorry. Because they both inspire me. No, just like that, I completely agree with both of you. And I think for us, because we create, you know, out of scratch, we create stuff. And, you know, the material, if we rethink the materials that we're using, it will have a huge impact. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to lose money. I think we have to rethink the material use. You can see, like in the fashion industry, how they shifted away from using fur and leather. They started using organic leather, and fur is really completely prohibited now. Like, it's very badly, like, it's not a great thing, you know, to use fur. It could be the same thing. Maybe concrete and glass will be the next fur in the construction industry. We need to look towards like sustainable materials. I think it starts from this. This is the first step to do, I think.
Well, you mentioned concrete and glass there, and I wanted to pick up on Paul's kind of unholy trinity that you mentioned of materials. Was it concrete, glass, and steel, Paul, that you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, what defined the 20th century, let's say modernism, as we call it, no?
So, okay, quickly to you, Paul. Are they really that bad, concrete, glass, and steel? And if they are, what can we replace them with that is better or less bad?
Should I go, Carl? Do you have any input on that?
Paul.
Yes, bad, yes, definitely. No question about that. Yes, they have a huge ecological impact. They have a huge CO2 level. I mean, also, I think what we were talking about food earlier. I think when you buy a product, when you use a product, it's very important or interesting to think of basically all the ecology that is behind that material to be able to produce it. Same when you're at the supermarket, you have like an orange that is coming from the other side of the world, or an orange is like organically grown from a local farmer. When you buy that product, you actually support all the economy behind it. So if you buy a piece of plasterboard or a concrete column or a window, it's the same idea. So yes, they are bad. There's like the numbers are out there. It's just yeah, extremely bad, especially in the way and in the speed and in the quantity we've been used to use it over the last, let's say, less than 100 years. Talking about alternatives, there's some. They are definitely not widely spread and not widely used yet, but there's definitely solutions. I mean, wood is one, because wood actually, instead of like needing carbon to actually produce, store the carbon. So it's like any plants, any natural elements that is out there, actually they store carbon, so they have a very positive impact on the environment. That being said, it's very difficult still to build in wood today because you need basically to use lacquers and different kind of products steel to actually bolt them together and tie them together. So saying that you're building in wood doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be sustainable. But there's also ways. I'm at the moment very interested into the building from earth. So it's something that is still quite used in countries or continents like Africa, and in Europe as well. Actually, there's this technique called rammed earth, where you basically have to, same way that you would start to pour concrete in between two pieces of wood, and you literally ram earth, so it's a kind of clay material, and just by the mechanical pressure, you can build structural walls, structures that are holding buildings. So that's one. There's buildings made of sands. I mean, there's really tons of possibilities when you start thinking about it. And they're commercially
viable, are they? It's not just kind of hippie tree hugging stuff. You put a viable proposal in.
Yeah, absolutely.
We actually built a villa out of. We actually worked on a project with. Sorry, I'm interrupting. Just to quickly jumping in. We actually used the earth that you're talking about, and we built a villa that is like a luxurious villa with a pool. But we used the earth that we excavated on site. That we cheated, we mixed it with a bit of concrete, but like we mostly used earth. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's all I have to say. I mean, this solution, I'm actually very eager also to hear from other people, other solutions or way to do it. But I mean, if you want to build skyscrapers that are, I'll leave you the word, Max, in a second. But if you want to build skyscrapers that are 100 floors tall, fully climatized.
Go to buy
glass, exactly. I'm speaking to you directly. Glazing from floor to ceiling, etc. You will have a lot of difficulties to make it sustainable and to locally source it and to have a positive impact on the environment. But if you start from the material and then you think of design from starting from the question of material and then try to push that material and see how far you can go, then probably you will be able to produce something actually interesting, relevant, and suitable for our futures.
I'm going to give Max the last word on this, and I'm going to have to wrap this up for no other reason. Partly because we're out of time, partly because can you see the light is fading from my face?
Yeah, I was wondering what's happening.
It's now nearly 6 p.m. It's October, and basically you won't be able to see me in 2 minutes. So, Max, you with the cows in the field in Western France or wherever you're claiming to be, what's your final word on this?
Well, no, it's interesting because if we look at the materials that we consider to be damaging, so you've already identified concrete, glass, and steel. And I might as well chuck plastic into the mix. I mean, these are all really, really amazing materials, and hence their success, right? And their perpetuation around the world has been fueled by the globalization of shipping and what have you, and global markets, right? So we can't really be blamed for using those materials. Equally, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution to alternatives either, and I think that's part of the mindset that needs to shift. I, for example, in eastern France, am surrounded by trees and timber, so of course there's a local trade in that. So it therefore makes sense that a lot of the houses and buildings are made from timber. You in Dubai have not a tree in sight, so why on earth would you use timber that ships halfway across the world? However, you're surrounded by sand, so presumably in a good position to make glass, and so on and so on. So I think actually what we could all do is to take our hats off to the 20th century and go, hey, good on you, that was an amazing era, but actually let's step way back in time to our ancestors and how they used to build things, because of course they were only ever presented with the materiality of their locality, and I think we could actually approach construction and products and all things with a lot more humility if we had that kind of mindset of locality.
Max is taking his hat off metaphorically, but not physically, so we will never know.
Because I haven't had a haircut for so long, that's why I'm wearing a cap.
That's not how, I have literally had to turn the light on my iPhone on because the sun is setting here. The call to prayer is on. So, gents, we are done here. That was a fascinating discussion. Really enjoyed it. To Paul, to Carl, to Max, thank you so much indeed for joining us at Belonging today. It was great fun, and hopefully we'll have this conversation this time next year over a cup of coffee or a cold beverage, and that will be awesome. But for now, shukran jazilan, ma salama.